I've been asked to speak to you today about climate heritage, so what we do with archaeology at risk from climate change, and to do that mostly in the context of the Cherish project, but also to talk a little bit about kind of some of the wider issues there and the wider work of the Discovery Programme. So yeah, I'm Hannah. I'm the Outreach and Comms Officer for the Discovery Programme, but as Ellen said, I actually initially worked on the Cherish Programme on the other side of the project in Wales. So at this point, I'm sure most people have a fairly solid understanding of what climate change is, what it's doing, and the impacts it's having on our heritage. But just for anyone who isn't so sure, we'll just start by going through that a little bit. So climate change has been going on for a little while now. It's due to release of greenhouse gases, particularly carbon dioxide, into our atmosphere. And it's having some fairly serious effects all over the world and differently affecting different parts of the world. So here, what we're seeing is a trend towards hotter, drier summers and warmer, wetter winters. We're seeing an overall average of higher temperatures, and we're also seeing more frequent extreme weather events. So what impact is this having on our heritage sites? Well, this slide focuses on coastal heritage because that's what we were mostly looking at as part of Cherish. But a lot of these things can be extended to inland sites and other types of heritage sites as well. So those rising temperatures worldwide are causing glaciers to melt, and we're seeing from that rising sea levels. So rising sea levels are causing more inundation and more impact on our coast, and obviously that can be coastal or estuarine or fluvial impacts as well. Those rising temperatures in Ireland are also bringing new pests. So that's causing impacts to underwater cultural heritage, but we're seeing that impacting collections, historic building fabric, etc. Hotter, drier summers are causing things to dry out and destabilize. But on maybe a more positive note, we're also getting the opportunity to occasionally discover new heritage sites when we're getting those more severe droughts in the summer. So through aerial survey and drone survey, we are seeing more visible parch marks and crop marks. Warmer, wetter winters is quite a big one for us. Obviously, we're already quite a wet place, and the increase in precipitation is going to have big impacts. It's already having big impacts. So we're seeing more saturation, more flooding, more runoff, and having to respond to that on the coast and obviously elsewhere. And we've seen that recently as well. And then the wild card in the mix is those more frequent extreme weather events because they're very unpredictable. We know they are going to happen more, but we don't obviously know when or where or how extreme, and things are working in a way that is very difficult for climate scientists to predict. But what we do know that we see in extreme weather events is that we can see catastrophic loss. So while those other climate impacts might lead to kind of slow changes over time, they can kind of weaken structures, which we can then lose a huge amount of in a single extreme weather event. So that's kind of what we're facing. So I was asked to speak to you a little bit about the international and national policy landscape and the background to the kind of work that we do. So it's a little bit dry, but bear with me because it's probably worth going through just to kind of have a sense of it. So obviously the international policy landscape focuses kind of quite strongly on mitigation rather than adaptation, because mitigation is what what we need more international collaboration on, really. Adaptation can be more a national policy focus. So our international mitigation policies largely stem from the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, which came in 1994. That's what kicked off the Conference of Parties, the COPs, that you're probably quite familiar with. They've been going from 95, and we've just had our most recent one there, COP30, over in Brazil. So initially that led to the Kyoto Accord back in 2005, which was then superseded by the Paris Agreement back in 2015. The Paris Agreement is essentially what we've all been working to since then. We might have something new to work with post this latest COP, but for now it's Paris. The Paris Agreement was really important for a number of reasons. For one, it was a legally binding treaty, and it was adopted by 196 countries worldwide, including some of the biggest climate offenders. So like the UK and at the time, the US. So that was really crucial. And the agreement was to try and limit global temperatures to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. So that's what brought in our net zero by 2050 targets, which is probably something you've all kind of come across in different ways in your life. That's where it all came from, was the Paris Agreement. However, it should be noted that we have already had our first period of exceeding that 1.5 degrees of warming back in 2023. That doesn't mean that all is lost or that we've completely not met Paris, because these things are measured on like a 5 to 10 year basis, but it does indicate that we're not working fast enough to meet those agreements. All of this information comes from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. This is again something you might be familiar with, particularly in relation to their projection data. Projection data is what we work to when we're doing climate adaptation in any context or any field. And how it works is that they create projections for increased temperatures for different scenarios based on how much carbon we release, how much greenhouse gases we release. So that 1.5 degrees of warming, that's our best case scenario future. And that is reliant on us reaching net zero by 2050, which, as I've just explained, actually isn't looking particularly hopeful. There are a number of other scenarios with a kind of business as usual scenario where we continue to release greenhouse gases at the rate that we're currently releasing. And that would lead to 4.4 degrees of warming by the end of the century, which would be completely catastrophic. So it's worthwhile remembering, even when we're focusing on adaptation, even when we're kind of working in the adaptation sector, that mitigation is still absolutely crucial, because if we don't decarbonize and we don't meet those net zero targets collectively through legislation and through collective action and to some extent through individual action, then we will be facing catastrophic change, and anything we would try to adapt to will not be enough. So mitigation really has to go hand in hand with adaptation measures as well. So all of this ended up bringing in the European climate law in 2021, and that's when we also got the first EU adaptation strategy back in 2021 as well. So what did that mean for Ireland? Well, here we've got the Climate Act. That's our kind of big act, and actually that brings in both mitigation and adaptation measures sort of under one umbrella. It's been in place since 2015 and regularly updated to 2021. So it gives us our net zero targets in line with Paris. It's also brought in the Climate Action Plan in 2024. And on the adaptation front, it put in place the National Adaptation Framework, the NAF, in 2024, which led to the climate change risk assessments by the EPA, the whole framework there, and the suggestion of climate change sectoral adaptation plans. And one of the sectors that was suggested as an important one for an adaptation plan, a key sector for that, was our sector. So the Built and Archaeological Heritage Climate Change Sectoral Adaptation Plan was first put in place in 2019, and then we've just had the latest one released by the department literally this month for 2025. So that 2019 plan put in place things like the Community Monuments Fund, the Historic Structures Fund, and the Built Heritage Investment Scheme, which allows us to do things like our survey, repeat survey monitoring. So hopefully that gives you kind of an overview of the way that these huge agreements and structures like Paris filter down to actually releasing funds for us to be able to do what we do, and start to adapt heritage and start to look after heritage in a changing climate. So those kind of macro things come down to us on the ground. And what do we do when we're on the ground? So this is kind of the more fun bit of how we go about it. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about one of the really key projects that's gone on in this sector, the CHERISH project. CHERISH stands for Climate, Heritage and Environments of Reefs, Islands and Headlands, making that lovely acronym. You'll see there that it ran from 2017 to 2023. So if you look at the kind of legislation that we've just looked over, you can see that actually CHERISH kind of predated quite a lot of those pieces of legislation, quite a lot of those conversations. So it really entered into quite a different landscape, quite a different conversation that was going on at the time. And it was pretty important in that regard. So what was it? Well, it was funded by the European Regional Development Fund. It was one of the Ireland-Wales cooperation programmes. So over those two nations of Ireland and Wales, we had 4 project partners. Here it was ourselves, the Discovery Programme, and the Geological Survey of Ireland. And in Wales, it was led by the Royal Commission and Aberystwyth University as well. So one of the lovely things about having these four project partners in place was that we had different expertise in different partners. So Geological Survey, that's kind of self-explanatory, and Aberystwyth University did a lot of the processing, the scientific processing and our environmental processing and data analysis there. So that allowed us to be very cross-disciplinary and achieve these aims of, back then we were really raising awareness, understanding past, present and future impacts. Again, those impacts are actually biting a little bit harder than I think anyone expected. As well as that kind of cross-disciplinary aspect with different partners, it was also really decided that the project wanted to link different parts of the historic environment, so land and sea and the intertidal zone, rather than focusing on a particular area, and also marry together different techniques and methodologies. So it was about kind of bringing together all of these different aspects, different ways of doing things to get a really detailed idea of what was going on at these different sites. So we took various sites around the coasts of Wales and Ireland. It wasn't the whole coastline that was available for study with the funding. It was just parts of the coastline. So within those parts, we chose a real variety of sites. There was no limit based on period or site type. So we were aiming to get a nice variety of different site types, different periods, different levels of vulnerability, different challenges. We then looked at them in a real variety of ways. So these are all techniques that you'll probably be fairly familiar with. No huge surprises in terms of different ways of understanding sites. But what we did was kind of throw these different techniques at different sites to understand them on different levels. So obviously, just looking at those first three that are the kind of aerial aspects of survey, LiDAR, drone survey, satellite mapping, and archaeological aerial reconnaissance. Obviously, those different techniques are quite good at understanding sites on different scales. So for different sites, we married together different aspects of those techniques to kind of create this clearer concept of what we were looking at and what challenges those sites were facing. We referred to this as the toolkit approach. And the toolkit approach was shared at the end of the project back in 2023 with a publication called Cherish Sharing Our Practice. And you'll see there on the right, this was kind of what we were trying to do, was create a document that could be used by anybody. So it could be used by a public sector researcher, a university researcher, or a community member. And so the idea was to show how these different survey techniques, how suitable they are for understanding different threats. So this is what we're looking at here. So LiDAR being not very useful for looking at the proliferation of pests, but very useful for looking at increased coastal erosion. And we also tried to share how difficult these different techniques are. So some of those, like community recording, can be carried out fairly easily once someone's had a bit of training. Some of them obviously involve a huge amount of specialism. We also looked at and put in this document the cost of the different techniques, so to give people a kind of a better sense of the sort of what you can do with your budget, essentially, if you're trying to understand some sites better. So as part of that, just to look again at this, the whole notion of what we do with coastal sites when they're at risk. What we've just looked at there is that survey and monitoring, so that kind of creation of baseline data and then repeat data. That's really helpful. But we have some other options in the mix as well. We've got managed retreat. So what we do with things on the coastline, we've had some interesting examples. So for example, SCAPE in Scotland, the Scottish Coastal Archaeology and the Problem of Erosion project, relocated a site, a burnt mound in Orkney, with the community, made it a community project. something that comes up quite a lot when you can speak to community members is often the notion of seawalls. Um, and that's something that I think looms quite large in people's concept of how we manage coastal sites. Um, I'm sure lots of people here would be very aware of the issues with seawalls in terms of actually protecting archaeology because it just bounces the the sea's force just a little bit further down the coast where there will be something. We don't know what, but there could be buried archaeology that we don't know about, or there could be buildings. Um, and of course, the other kind of huge issue with seawalls is that mitigation thing that I mentioned earlier. Concrete is one of the most carbon intensive uh, materials that we can use. So it's questionable whether we really want to be using that without real thought. Now there's more conversation around things like seagrasses and human-made reefs and things like that. So that's an interesting area of discussion at the moment and research into that. We've also got the big scary word of prioritization, which I'm sure for some people on this call will be in the public sector, that's one of the things that we do have to really think about and respond to. And of course, this kind of data gathering is so important. And finally, there we've got research excavation. So again, sort of like with the parch marks, one of these interesting, maybe slightly more positive things that that can come out of these situations where we might get the opportunity to excavate something because it's a significant risk that we, wouldn't necessarily be wanting to research to excavate if it wasn't a risk. So these are the kind of things that we bring into the mix. I was asked to speak briefly about some of the practical challenges that can come into play now that we are in a changing climate. So while we're trying to do this work, particularly on the coast. So some of the things that came up there were the fieldwork season length. That's now, as everyone knows, things are just getting a little bit more unpredictable. So obviously this summer we had a pretty good season. We had probably a longer season than usual. And last summer we had much more rain and much more intermittent rain over the course of the summer. So that's also a real challenge for people doing conservation building, lime mortars, anything that needs to dry out can be a real challenge with those summers that are just not going to be as clear and predictable as they have in the past. Extreme weather, obviously equipment and safety are an issue there. Access is turning into quite a big issue on some sites, particularly with islands. We've got shorter periods of time where we can access islands potentially. Mitigation, again, sort of mentioning it again, but kind of trying to communicate to people about the relationship between mitigation and adaptation can be quite a challenge when we are in danger of losing sites. And yeah, because of that aspect that it is very emotional. So managing loss, I think both myself and Ronan are going to talk a little bit about our relationship with community groups. And yeah, that can be a huge challenge in the mix there as well. So I'm just going to go through a couple of case studies from the Cherish project to give you a sense of sort of how we brought all these things together. It's been a bit sort of general until now. So I'll give you one case study from Ireland and one case study from Wales. So here in Ireland, the kind of an interesting one to look at is Dún Beg. I imagine is a site that most people here are quite familiar with because of it being such a beautiful and such an exciting site. This was a site that was being monitored by the Cherish project before and after the period where quite a lot of the site was lost during storm failure. So it was that catastrophic loss that we discussed earlier, and the idea that things can build up slowly, and then in an extreme weather event can just go. So what we're looking at there, that main picture is a digital surface model created from drone survey. So drone survey was kind of crucial on this site. We did, this kind of mapping and digital surface model creation, but then you can also obviously use your drones for oblique pictures just to get a view of eroding coastal edges, which you'd never get to see safely from the landward side of sites. And then crucially, we also used desk-based assessment. So went back and looked at previous documents, and that allowed us to create this kind of plan. So these change plans. So looking at the plan from 1898, when we were obviously seeing fairly limited human-induced climate change. Then in 2017, that red line, and then just a year later, 2018, after Storm Ophelia, the kind of significant change that we saw in that period. So from Wales, this is Dinistyle Coastal Hill Fort. It's an Iron Age site that has quite a lot of mythology connected to it. So it's quite important to a number of people, particularly in North Wales, which is where it is. So this is one where we used aerial reconnaissance to fly the site to get a sense that in its current landscape setting, there's a lot of different archaeological sites in the area. So to get a clearer view of that. We did geophysical surveys together to have a look at what was going on again, both in the site and around the site, and precision survey. So terrestrial metric survey was used here and used pretty widely across all of our sites. This was also one where we had the opportunity to do traditional excavation just on the very edge of the site. So just that kind of strip that's really quite at risk in the next 50 to 100 years. That was where we were able to excavate. So it was undertaken as a community excavation, so by one of the trusts in Wales, but then with community members involved as well. And we found this pretty incredible roundhouse, which is really large for a roundhouse in Wales, about 8 meters across, and really quite monumental. So that was pretty exciting. And from that, we created a bunch of interpretation resources. So this is one of those. And we worked with Wessex Archaeology's illustrators to create this. So it kind of incorporates some of the aspects of artifacts from the site. So we've got a dog there because there was like a huge dog skull was found on site. We also used our data that we'd collected from a topographical survey and looking at the changes to the coastline over time to be able to reconstruct where we thought the coastline might have been in the Iron Age when this would have been inhabited. So you can see the quite significant change there from where the coastline would have originally been when it was built to what we're looking at today, with quite a huge amount of it sort of eaten into. And yeah, also then thinking about the future and where that's going to go. So from that, we also created this little video, which if it will play for me, I'll just play now because it's quite sweet and maybe an interesting example of what we can do when we kind of put all of these different bits of data together, the kind of narratives that we can create, and then the ways that we can share those narratives. If you have no sound, it's not the end of the world, there's just music behind it rather than much else.
Bravo.
So hopefully you did get some sound effects and music with that. Apologies if not. But yeah, so that hopefully gives you a bit of an impression of yeah how we approach some of the communication aspect and that kind of narrative way of informing from the data that we created. So from that we also created these interpretation panels on site that are there permanently, and they're continuing to do walks and talks on site so that people can continue to see it, as kind of hinted at by that little illustration there. This roundhouse has now been conserved and left and will eventually fall off the edge of that cliff over the next 100 years, 50 years, no one's entirely sure. So that is kind of being left there as a monument to these changes. So Brian's going to go through some of this kind of aspect as well, but just to very quickly tell you a little bit more about this communications outreach side of it. This was really important to the whole project, and I guess when we're talking about climate change, it sort of has to be. If this is everybody's heritage, and letting people know what's happening with it is really key. So we did walks and talks on the coast, we did outreach days, we did the community excavation at Dinstone, we did a second one in South Wales at Cordoba, another promontory fort down there. We went into schools and we engaged with the media quite a lot as well. With our schools work, we created some fun resources, including this kind of table that would show different kind of changes in the landscape over time. And that's Puffy, our trusty mascot, who accompanied us as well. We created the Cherries exhibition. This was there was one for Wales, one for Ireland, both were bilingual and travelled around, actually continuing to travel around. The Cherish exhibition for Ireland's just been over in Oranmore for Heritage Week this year. And here it is pictured at the Senedd, so the Welsh Parliament, with the Minister Julie James, who was at that time the Minister for Climate Change, looking at it. So this is the way that, it's important to talk to communities. It's also really important to get this stuff in front of legislators for all sorts of reasons. So it's if we can communicate well to members of the public, we can communicate across society in that way. And there on the bottom right, you can see the illustrator Caris Tate, who created those beautiful illustrations that I've been showing through this presentation. And I think those were really important as well for kind of visually putting across some of these quite complicated bits of data, some of these quite complicated ideas, and some of these quite challenging concepts. Visually is a great way to do that. So now the Cherish legacy, as I say, we're kind of continuing to talk about the project, continuing to process data from the project, continuing to put data out from the project through the DRI. Another aspect has been the landowner management plans. So these are documents given to landowners, some of whom were private landowners, sites that we were working on, giving them an indication, sort of as simply as possible, about the kind of impacts that climate change will have on their land, how that might affect monuments, and giving them some suggested actions that they could take as well. So again, just trying to sort of bring in a practical aspect. So just to give you an indication of some of the other ongoing climate heritage work that the Discovery Programme has been undertaking. We've taken this toolkit approach into some other areas that we weren't able to study during the Cherish project. So that's included St John's Point up in County Donegal, and the Marine Peninsula over in County Galway, where we've been doing a bunch of these different toolkit aspects, including coastal zone assessment. So to just get a clearer sense of what is on our coastline and record sites in the first instance. As mentioned at the start, we've just released, the department's just released the Built and Archaeological Heritage the Built and Ecological Heritage Climate Change Sectoral Adaptation Plan for 2025, that was facilitated by Carrick Conservation and the Discover Programme worked on as well. And then the other thing that I just want to talk to you about is the baseline climate change risk assessment scoring system. So this is a piece of work that's been going on as essentially a risk assessment for heritage assets in Ireland. It's a scoring system that was created with a blended methodology based on exposure and vulnerability. So essentially looking at something like the climate driver, so that would be maybe precipitation, increased rainfall. That would be the hazard would then be rain, and maybe flood, like so maybe fluvial flooding. But that would affect different assets differently. So if it's kind of upstanding monument or earthworks, it might be able to respond to that quite well. It might be able to be inundated and then dry out without too much problems. Whereas if it's a roofed historic building containing a collection, then it might have a much higher degree of vulnerability. So you can combine those things together to understand whether it's at low risk, so that sort of bottom left-hand circle there, or at very extreme risk. This allowed us to create some data that is still, we're still in the process of looking at how it's going to be released, because as you can imagine, there are some strong sensitivities around this. But this map here shows you the number of heritage assets that are at risk in each local authority area. And this one shows it by percentage, which is maybe a little bit more helpful to look at because obviously places like Cork and Kerry just have a large number of heritage assets. So, but certain areas of the coastline are very at risk, for example. So that gives you a bit of an indication of what we're facing as a country and the kind of level of adaptation we need to be thinking about. So that all just leaves me to say thank you to all the people who've been involved in these projects and continue to facilitate climate adaptation work in the country. And if anyone's interested in downloading the Sharing Our Practice document to kind of get a sense of that toolkit from Cherish, then you can just scan this QR code and that should take you there. So that's me. Thank you so much.
That was fantastic, Hannah. Thank you so much. The video was really good. I know there's so many different aspects to the heritage at risk, but the video kind of brought all those different aspects and different areas. It was just really nice, really great talk. Thanks very much. I meant to say that if anybody wants to ask questions, just put them in the chat and I can moderate at the end, and I can ask the trainers the questions. And also, if you want, you can put up your hand at the end. So we're going to leave the questions to the end, if that's okay. And we're going to go now over to Ronan Healy from the Heritage Council. Thanks, Ronan.
Thank you, Ellen. I'm going to share my screen now. I am not I'm not an archaeologist, as you might guess, by profession or anything like that. So my work is mainly dealing with events, and obviously National Heritage Week is a big event. But today I'm going to talk a bit about the Heritage Council, what we do in the Heritage Council in terms of heritage at risk. And then I'm also going to talk about then Heritage Week itself and the theme for 2026 for National Heritage Week, which will be very prescient to what we're talking about today. So I'm sure you're all aware of the Heritage Council, but just to go over it, it's established under the Heritage Act 1995, and it's a public body whose mission is to develop wider understanding of the vital contribution that our heritage makes to our social, environmental, and economic well-being. We currently have 28 staff, and we advise education and awareness of aspects of heritage, and our remit is in heritage. It's natural, built, and cultural heritage. So that's our remit in terms of covering three broad areas of heritage. And in terms of the Heritage Council itself, we run lots of programs. We run the Heritage in Schools grants program, Adopt a Monument, we'll go into the museum standards, heritagemaps.ie, if you've ever used this, it's really good, and the Irish Wall Town Network, I'm sure some of you might be aware of. And then also we work with our partners in local government, such as heritage officers and biodiversity officers, which I will come back to later. And just mentioned then my role myself, I coordinate and promote National Heritage Week for the Heritage Council. So I manage National Heritage Week on a national level. So I facilitate and support event organisers through training events, merchandise, inspiration, and lots more. And I'll come back to that later. So talking about heritage at risk and at-risk heritage and what the Heritage Council does. So we have our own strategic plan, Our Place in Time, which you can get online. And it has a number of strategic pillars. And one of them includes climate change, biodiversity loss, which is obviously an aspect of heritage at risk. And that's a big focus for us in terms of natural heritage. But we do focus on built heritage as well. And you can see as well, we work with one of the pillars is communities and education and engagement. And we share knowledge basically with the broader public and with also with government and with experts in different fields as well on research that we carry out on aspects of heritage. We have staff that deal with this directly. So not myself, but we have a climate officer, we have a head of climate, Catherine Casey, we have a cultural heritage officer, and we have an architectural officer. And they all work in different aspects of dealing with heritage at risk. The one thing I'd mention then is the National Adaptation Framework. So this is produced by government. And it has it's a whole of government response basically to climate adaptation in Ireland. So I'm just carrying on here from what Hannah has been saying. But there's two sectorial adaptation plans that relate to heritage. There's one on built heritage and archaeology, and there's also one on biodiversity. For the natural heritage one, the one for biodiversity, it's about the response obviously to biodiversity. And when I talk about at-risk heritage, we're talking about natural heritage. We're talking about plants, animals, insects. We're talking about changes in geographical range of plants, and we're also talking about storm damage to coastal habitats. So you can see there obviously affects the archaeological heritage, as Hannah showed in her video, but it does affect obviously flora and fauna as well. So this is part of the government-wide response, and the Heritage Council is part of this. So as you can see, there's a lot of actions in it, and there's a lot of objectives as well, and the Heritage Council is part of that. Probably more relevant to yourselves is the Built and Archaeological Heritage Climate Change Sectorial Adaptation Plan, which is a mouthful. So this is about how climate change is impacting historic buildings, archaeological sites, landscapes, and underwater heritage. And there's 5 strategic goals. You can see them all listed here with 28 actions. So the Heritage Council is dealing with a lot of these already in terms of skills, adapting heritage ground, and providing support in terms of policy and planning for people that are either local authorities or people working on the ground in terms of understanding what's happening, what do we need to do, and how do we address it. And just one statistic that came from is in this adaptation plan is that over 25% of all recorded heritage sites are exposed to one or more climate hazards by 2100. So this is something that's going to have a real effect, obviously, on heritage sites. And we're, as you can see from the Cherish program, is just probably the tip of the iceberg in terms of what's the hazards that we're not aware of yet, or that what sites will be affected. In terms of the plan, the Heritage Council ourselves, we have a number of roles. So we're a leader in training, skills development. We're going to be a partner in public engagement, and we're going to be collaborator on methodologies and monitoring. So as I said, we're not the lead department on this, and that's generally our lead department is the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage, or the OPW, but we're a major delivery partner across all these strategic goals. So it's an interesting plan. So if you haven't seen it, it might be worth a read. So in terms of stuff we're doing ourselves, practical stuff on the ground, we have the Adopt a Monument program. So we're often communities across Ireland supports in terms of we have, I think, about 20 monuments that have been signed up so far. So you might maybe yourself have been dealing with community groups that have been adopted a monument, but the idea is that a community might have a monument in their community that needs work in terms of they want to secure for the future. They might want to address issues around the monument. They might want to preserve it or promote it. So just provide information boards or things like that. So it's been a very popular program, and it's always oversubscribed each year that we look for new invitations for people to come on board. And it's been really successful. It's been running for a number of years. And there's been lots of different sites that have come onto the program that have done really well out of it. Just to give you an example of sort of sites that might come onto the program and that are affected by defines heritage at risk. Kilshanna Church in County Kerry. So this is a medieval church and graveyard, and it's located at the very tip of Maharees, which is right in the coastline in Castle Gregory in County Kerry. And as you can see, it contains an early medieval cross slab. So the Maharees Conservation Group want to conserve the site as much as they can, as it faces significant challenges from coastal erosion and climate change. So this is really a heritage at risk site. So with the Adopt the Monument program, they'll be working, the community group will be leading all this and coming up with conservation plans possibly, or how the best to manage the site with the at-risk heritage there and what things to do. So this is really community-led project, and all the sites are community-led, so it's up to communities to come up with ideas. And what usually they do go out is they decide maybe what to do with they get experts in with expert advice, and then they might apply for grants to either do different aspects of the project in terms of what they want to do with their own site. So each monument is unique and each monument is different. So you tend to see a trend across different monuments in terms of the things that they do. But as you can see, a lot of them have their own unique stories. Also, in terms of our built heritage and architectural heritage, we in the Parish Council are working on developing a centre for traditional skills. And these are skills that are at risk. Now, this sort of straddles the line between cultural heritage and built heritage. But for example, thatching you see here. Now, the skill of thatching is dying out. The practitioners in Ireland all tend to be older, and a lot of them are retiring. And the Heritage Council wanted to address this. So we actually started a course last year with Carlo Kilkenny ETB, and they ran a year-long course for educating people who want to become thatchers. So it's a practical course to work on site, to learn how to do thatching and to do work placement and everything. And the idea is that they go out and become professional thatchers. The photo you can see here is when we had an open day at the Heritage Council for Heritage Week, where we invited people with various different traditional skills to showcase what they do. And this photo here is some of the students from that course. So they're showcasing. So they're actually almost finished the course now and be running the course again in January. But we hope to expand the different courses or work with different ETBs and different agencies in terms of providing courses and training. So not touch thatching, but blacksmithing, lime plastering, things like that. So traditional skills or traditional skills that are part of our built heritage in terms of vernacular buildings, and not vernacular buildings, but right across the remit in terms of skills that need to be supported and maintained that are at risk of dying out. Now, in terms of cultural heritage, not too relevant to archaeology, but well, in terms of intangible cultural heritage, but I wanted to talk about just a few different programs we're running. So the MSPI, I don't know if you're aware of it, it's an accreditation program. So it's Museum Standards Program in Ireland. So it embeds the best standards in collection care. And this is primarily, as I say here, preventive rather than reactive. So in terms of artifacts, and it works with a lot of different museums across Ireland in terms of that they keep up a certain standard in terms of how they mind artifacts and the education they provide. We also run the Heritage Schools, which is important for teaching future generations about natural environment, and then, but also the other heritage at risk, which is our tangible and intangible cultural heritage. So we have experts that go into schools and they provide teaching to school kids and hopefully inspire the next generation of archaeologists and heritage experts. Then we have what's probably very relevant is conservation internship program. So this actually actively undertakes repair and conservation works and items and within cultural heritage collections. So we run an internship program with a few national institutions in Ireland, and these students work on different items, artifacts, documents in terms of preservation and conservation. And it's unique in Ireland because to do this sort of conservation work, if you want to get training, you have to go outside of Ireland. So you can't do that. This is the only place in Ireland that you can get it. The other things at risk is things like cultural heritage. I'm going to mention here the Traveller Heritage Strategy. That's the Heritage Council is working on, the Cultural Heritage Officer is working on. And the other things is our virtual records treasury of Ireland. So we've a pilot project at the moment with 3 county archivists to work on the digitalization of records of the Poor Law Union. So it just gives you a broad remit of all of these things that the Heritage Council touches in terms of you might not think things are at risk, but the more you start thinking about at-risk heritage, the broader the things that become underneath the remit. So in terms of us, how we work and working with local government, we recently launched a new partnership and programs called CANGLE. This is the Irish word for connection or tie. And this is how the Heritage Council works with local authorities. So I'm sure you're all familiar with this. There's a heritage officer in each local authority. And as of now, this year, it's only been running about 4 years, but there's a biodiversity officer in every local authority in Ireland. And the Heritage Council part funds these programs and these office roles. And these are the people on the ground that work with local communities in terms of managing heritage and work in the local authority areas. And they will obviously comment on like planning and stuff like that, as well as that. They also develop county plans as well, and heritage county plans and biodiversity county plans. From 2026, we will be including archivists and architectural conservation officers. So the CANGLE is going to get wider. So we're going to have meetups 2 or 3 times a year. And the whole idea is that these different roles work together on a project. So within a local authority area. So it might be maybe before you've just dealt with the heritage officer in a local authority. In the future, you might be dealing with the heritage officer and the biodiversity officer, and maybe the architectural conservation officer if it's built heritage, whatever work that might be happening. So the whole idea is that we have these in local authorities, and I know some local authorities have county archaeologists, and maybe down the future they might be included as well. But the whole idea is all these experts working together for managing and preserving heritage and particular at-risk heritage in their local authority area. And just to give you an example of what this might look like practically on the ground when we're talking about at-risk heritage, an example here from Fingal County Council, and this is a project they have run themselves along with Abarta Heritage. And it asks the public to work with the public to record impact of climate change in the locality. So they have produced a toolkit, as you can see here, and they've also produced a reporting form. So they ask people in the community to go out and look at monuments or heritage sites in the community, and they can fill in this reporting form for updating the local authority. And the whole idea behind the project is to involve communities with monuments and sites and at-risk heritage so that they can take part in and be part of the process in terms of monitoring the sites and how they might deal with them. So the link is there at the bottom, and it's well worth checking out. In terms of working with the public and communities, the Heritage Council offers a grants program. So we offer grants to community groups. So, but also organizations that might be working in heritage as well. So we offer a large grants program. I think we ask about 9 million a year that we offer out in grants. And there's also the traditional farm building scheme, which some of you might have heard of as well, that we offer in grants as well. And then there's publications that we offer as well. So we do toolkits, advice documents, and lots more. So coming to my area of expertise is National Heritage Week itself and how we work with communities in terms of National Heritage Week. So just to remind any of you, if you're not aware what is National Heritage Week, I'm sure you all are, but we are one of Ireland's largest festivals. We estimate we had about 500,000 people attend a Heritage Week event last year, which is huge. It runs over 9 days. We are an all-island event, so we have events in about 29 counties last year. And it's in-person and online projects. In 2024, we had over 2,500 events, which was our biggest year yet. So it's massive. So Heritage Week is huge in terms of the participation, and it's great because it's so local. There's event nearly in every county, and there's always an event almost in every townland, or I don't want to say townland, but every parish in the country, which is quite impressive. And just to give you an idea here, as I said, the remit does cover every aspect of natural, built and cultural heritage, and Heritage Week, all sorts of events happening. So I'm sure you're aware, you attended events yourself. So talks, walks, there's also a lot of demonstrations and workshops and things like that happening as well. So for Heritage Week 2026, so why are we here today? Because, well, why am I here today? Because 2026, the Heritage Week, the theme is Heritage at Risk. And we'll be announcing this very soon. But the idea behind the theme is for our society and the public to look at the risks to our heritage. So both tangible and intangible, and how much of our heritage risks erosion. So the team is going to pose questions to our event organizers about, cultural heritage, built heritage. What actions should we do to be raising awareness of the risks to this heritage, and how they might and we might preserve heritage for future generations? And that covers all types of heritage. So the team, a lot of event organizers get inspired by the theme each year, and they really try to make an effort to adapt what they're doing for Heritage Week, or host an event based on the theme. So we expect the same this year for 2026. So I expect that a lot of community groups and individuals will be going out into community and thinking about heritage risk, and talk about monuments. They'll be talking about cultural heritage and how they can address that theme and what they might do. So I expect a lot of interesting and inspiring events in terms of addressing this for people, the public, to attend across Heritage Week in 2026. So this is what I was just saying here. So we will be encouraging community to participate in the theme. There'll be a public awareness campaign as well. So we'll be starting from about June or July next year, promoting National Heritage Week, but also promoting the theme of Heritage at Risk, and sort of inspiring community groups and people to think about heritage at risk. So we hope that inspires people. In terms of how we work then with community groups, we support them in a number of ways. So we provide training events. So we'll do a training event in probably May next year for community groups, and we do it each year. So we do it for Heritage Week, but we also do it for people that receive grants, and how to use the grants, community groups. Firstly, how to apply for grants, but then also ideas in terms of how to use the grants, the projects, give people inspiration with projects that have been very successful so far. And we also provide practical guidance then as well in terms of the training, like how people can organize events, health and safety, things like that. And also how to maybe seek out expertise, which I'll come back to later. We also provide guidance, as I said, through the heritage biodiversity officers mainly, but also from next year, archivists and architectural conservation officers. So these people will be, obviously, they're based in local authorities, and they're the first point of contact for community groups. So they work on the ground in terms of providing support, providing guidance, and also helping people shape their projects. So in terms of people might start with a monument and they might have great inspirations, but not sure what to do. It's usually the heritage officer who gives them advice in terms of steps and, helps them develop like a yearly plan or a 3-year plan or 5-year plan to working on a monument, what they can do, what they should do, and who they need to help them along the way. And that usually involves a lot of usually an archaeologist along the way. We also provide a lot of supports in terms of publications. So we have things like we produce a handbook for Heritage Week event organizers. We also produce different guides. So we have a sustainable events guide, and that also includes a checklist that people can use. We're providing a inclusivity events guide checklist as well. And you can get them on the website. So it's just handy for community groups. Again, just things they need to think about in terms of organizing events and how they go about organizing events. And then in terms of Heritage Week itself, the website, we have lots of how-to resources, guides, and also we do a lot of technical resources in terms of templates for newsletters, posters. So it's no point putting on a great event unless you promote it. And no point putting on a great event if no one attends. So you have to promote it. So again, we help them promote the event, and we do that through lots of resources and the training as well. And then finally, I'll just leave it on this. So in terms of working with community groups, if you have experience working with community groups, and I'll just speak from my interactions as sort of someone in the middle between both, community groups often come to me or talk about they need expertise, advice, and guidance. So they're always seeking that in terms of what do they do, how do they go about addressing it, and they might have ideas about maybe dealing with a monument, but not sure what they want to do, or they might have great, they might start off with great ideas and then practicalities might hit. So as yourselves as expertise in your area of archaeology, it would be they might reach out to people like yourself. So I think community groups really appreciate experts and knowledge, people with knowledge coming in. So you might get approached maybe next year, especially with the theme about heritage at risk, and particularly around monuments and sites, that people might be seeking your advice and your support, your advice and your guidance, and maybe even asking you just to present on the day if you have particular knowledge of a particular site. So I definitely want to encourage you to think about that and working with, if you get the chance, or if you even if you live in a certain area beside a monument or near a monument and you know a bit about it, or you can provide professional advice. Community groups always appreciate support and expertise. So they have the enthusiasm, but sometimes they might not have the people there with the knowledge. So they really need that, and people like yourself have that knowledge and have that expertise, and the two married together makes a great Heritage Week event. So I suppose I'm saying is, if you have your spare time next year, I know it's the probably high season in terms of digs and stuff like that, but even if you are doing a dig, maybe having an open day or something like that for people to inspire, and it might encourage community groups as well to get involved in some way. So that's it for myself. These are my contact details if you have any questions about what I do in terms of Heritage Week, but also more broadly around what the Heritage Council do. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Ronan. That was really good. You dealt with a lot there as well, which is brilliant. Yeah. And, the collaboration theme is really important as well, that we're all collaborating together with regards to heritage at risk and involving the community. So if anybody has questions, just put them in the chat, or if you want to put up your hand, we can take them that way either. There's one question in the chat from Martin Jones for Hannah. He's wondering when the excavations at Dinas took place.
Yeah, so the excavations at Dinas were first excavated in 2019, led by Gwynedd Archaeological Trust, which was supervised by David Hopewell, with the community sort of aspect of that in there as well. And then as part of the kind of charitable legacy aspect, there was further threats and motions in 2022.
Great, thanks, Anna.
Are there any other questions from the floor, from the Zoom? Just if you want to put up your hand and unmute yourself. No.
It's always a very good sign or a very bad sign if there's no questions.
I think it was a very good sign. Yeah.
I always think that we've imparted all the information.
So so there's where I go on holidays, Hannah, there's a lot of shell middens being exposed and re-exposed, and I'm just wondering what is happening to those shell middens. Is there a policy in place, or if you knew?
Yeah, shell middens are a challenging one, and there are some people who spend a lot of time thinking about shell middens because of the fact that they can date from such wide periods, so. And they're obviously very, very fragile, and they can be so variable in size and extent. So they're a really interesting one. I'd say they're possibly one where there's a lot of potential that we would certainly go out and record them as part of coastal zone assessments. And they are one where community recording can be really helpful. Just a wee snap of it with a scale. That's one of our little things we've done for Cherish, and we've continued with the Discovery Programme, is to have scale cards to give out so that members of the public can send in little photographs with a scale. So that, just to kind of get a sense of where they are, because you're right, there's limited exploration of those site types, and they are very vulnerable. So
I must get one of those.
Taking pictures for us.
I must get one of those scale bars from you. So
we'll get you one.
Any other questions from anybody else, or you're all very quiet? Ronan has a question.
Is that working? Yeah. Question for Ronan. Just in terms of great presentation. Sorry, dropped the line there a little bit, but every year we have the Heritage Council themes, and we'd obviously run a lot of events. And sometimes we come close to the theme, and sometimes we hit it by we don't come anywhere near it. Yeah. And I'm just thinking for the Heritage Risk theme, as we're planning for our events in 2026, to what extent do you want people to actually speak to the theme? Is it like what's your intention there?
Yeah, so the theme there is it's inspiration mainly. So I know there's event organizers that organize the same event every year, whatever the theme is, so they don't change. And then there's some that will, maybe like yourselves, it's stop and take time and think about the theme and what sort of event can we do around the theme. So the whole idea is it's an inspiration. So it's not mandatory to include the theme in whatever event you do, but it might inspire you to adapt your event or include some aspect of at-risk heritage in your event, but you don't have to.
So it can be used as a lens for us to look at.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And also it can be interpreted any way you wish to interpret. So everyone, like, a heritage risk is probably fairly definite, but there's sometimes previously themes can be so broad. The idea is it's broad enough that anyone can you can look at so many different angles, like.
Gotcha.
So you might look at whatever conservation, restoration, but you also might look at the opposite end of it, as like literally heritage falling into the sea, as sort of Hannah's mentioned earlier. So it can be, you can go any angle you wish, and you can take any inspiration you wish. Just really up to yourself.
Or none at all.
Yeah, exactly. Or none at all.
Grand. No, that's grand. No, it's just first I think it's great to actually have the dates now. For us to start thinking about. That's a really positive development, and also actually have you setting out your the stall so that we can actually start seeing across the range of events that we do some may actually speak to the theme directly, some may not come close, but the speakers can have that, so can be invited to use that as a lens for their paper, so their papers and presentations and work. So look, great talk, and thanks also to Hannah. That was really interesting as well. And I really enjoyed those reconstruction videos, the video and the various reconstructions. If you could pass on the name of the artist, that'd be really handy. Because they're really good, both the artists for the reconstructions and then say the production company. Was that done by yourselves or the Cherish team, or?
No, so there was a few different people involved there. So the kind of illustrations of the different techniques, that was by an artist and graphic designer called Caris Tate, who's based in Wales. And then the reconstruction drawings of the roundhouse was by Wessex Archaeology, their illustration team. They've got quite a big illustration team there now. And then I can't right now remember the name of the team that did the video illustration. But yeah, they weren't archaeological illustrators, so that was kind of an interesting back and forth there. They were illustrators rather than archaeological illustrators. But yeah, I can get you the name of those guys because they were great to work with.
No, it's
They're also UK based.
Yeah, a lovely approach to actually presenting presenting change over time. Really, really impressive. So thank you very much for that. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ronan. Claire wanted to ask a talk there. Or a question? Do you want to unmute yourself, or will I read it? Yeah, there's Claire. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, guys. Yeah, I don't know. It might be more relevant to Hannah, but I'm just wondering how you mentioned something about emotional impact of heritage at risk, and I'm just wondering what your experience of that was with community groups, if people sort of vocalized their feelings about it or not.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, and I guess would be quite anecdotal rather than something that was kind of monitored quantitatively or qualitatively as part of the project. And it's definitely something that's come up in previous projects as well in Scotland and stuff. And I think the one that's interesting is obviously for everybody, and it's kind of what's relevant, for the whole Heritage Week thing as well, is that your local monument is the most important thing to you. Very often, when we talk about prioritization, we talk about our national sites and all of that kind of thing. But yeah, but for people who walk to a monument every day, that is so important to them. And I think the thing that often comes up, the thing that I've seen most often is that sense of like not enough is being done to protect this monument. And that's where the kind of the whole seawall things often comes in with that as well. And I think that's a really interesting one. That sense of, I guess the emotion underneath that would be kind of anger and worry. And maybe, what's kind of at play there is the fact that we're facing things that we have quite limited impact on in terms of climate change. And then we have a monument that we can maybe have some impact on. So it's kind of these scales of like power, which is, I guess, probably what plays into your work with this kind of thing as well. But I guess what kind of underlies that notion of like not enough is being done to save this particular monument is something that I think we maybe struggle with as a sector more widely, of the sense of like loss of archaeology, of physical archaeology being not very well understood. I think probably a lot of us have those kind of conversations at dinner parties or whatever when we say, "Oh, I'm an archaeologist," and people say, "Gosh, isn't it terrible that people dug up this site to build a road," and happen to have that conversation of like, "Oh, that's how commercial archaeology works," and I think that's it's something that we haven't done particularly well as a sector at communicating to the wider public, and I think it bites us quite often, and that certainly comes into play with this. So it's kind of a long-winded way of saying like there are no clear answers there in terms of communicating what we can do as archaeologists and what we can't do. We can record, we can't always save, and I think then it comes back to that powerless or powerful thing of like, okay, well, what can you do? Like, can we get communities involved to record? Even if we can't save it, can we record it? And can that process of recording help process some of those emotions? I think the example from Scape with the moving of the burnt mound on Sanday, which is in the Northern Isles of Orkney, was really interesting. Like, that was way more in some ways kind of more for the community than for archaeologists. As archaeologists, we would say, oh, that monument's lost something by being relocated. It's lost its psychological context. But for the community, that was a really powerful thing to do, to learn some archaeology, do that excavation and do that translocation of the monument. So it's a really, I guess this is why this kind of emotional stuff is so cool, because it's this intersection of our needs as archaeologists and national needs for heritage and individuals' needs and community needs and local needs. And I guess, when we're working in this space, we just have to try and see what we can negotiate in that way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Hannah.
Thanks, Hannah. Yeah, difficult area to discuss, but and that's why it's so important to get the community to come out to our archaeological excavations, the school children, and see exactly what we're doing. And it's all really positive what we're doing out on site. So there's one more question. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, guys, that's from a layman's perspective. So obviously not in the sector, but like our Adopting Monument program is a great example of this. Like, when we talk about emotional impact, usually the reason why community groups get involved in a monument or a site is like they're either sadness or anger. It's usually anger, because why isn't someone doing something about this? And it's great that it's the emotional attachment to sites that drives people usually to want to do something. Like, I know obviously you're come from, archaeologists come from professional perspective, and this is a site and whatever, it's a preserver doing a dig or whatever. But from a community group, it's the emotional attachment. Like, this has been here all my whole life, and now all of a sudden it's falling down. So I give you an example, like Doon Fort in Donegal. I don't know if anyone's aware of that. It's in southwest Donegal. It's a stone wall fort, and it's been part of the Adopting Monument program for about 7 years, led by Paula Harvey. And there's vegetation there. The walls started actually to fall in, and they've managed to rebuild the wall that partially fell. And the fort is, it's on an island in a lake in Donegal, so it's very hard to get to. But as Paula said herself, she won the Heritage Hero this year at the awards. So it's Lifetime Achievement Award. She said, like, this fort has stood for 1,000 years, and hopefully with our work it'll stand for another 1,000 years. So the emotional attachment for her, she has that fort, and the whole community, like, that's got that fort preserved, and it's going to definitely be standing. So it starts with that. I mean, so I think it's so important. So great question.
Thanks, Ronan.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ronan. That's great. There's one question from Tori. Hannah, you mentioned landowner management reports provided to owners. Is there a plan for monitoring how landowners implement recommendations or mitigation measures?
So no, not really. Those were very much kind of designed to be helpful suggestions, and like a base, kind of a base for those people to kind of just help them figure out what they're working with, or what they're dealing with. The project wouldn't really have any power to make demands on how those monuments are dealt with, beyond obviously in Ireland and Wales, there'd be slightly different rules from government bodies about how monuments on land should be dealt with. So it's not like we're going back and checking up on them. Those they can look at those plans and never read them if they want to. But if they are then in a situation where they need to work with if it is an individual and they need to work with a government body, or they wanted to get involved in the Community Monuments Fund or something like this, then hopefully that management plan would be a good basis for building on, is the idea.
Thanks, Hannah. Have we any other questions? There's no more questions in the chat, so I think people probably want to go and get a coffee now. Just finally to say thank you so much to Hannah and Ronan. Really, really excellent talks, and it's given us lots to think about and lots to do for the future and for Heritage Week 2026. And then just one final The IAI are running a lecture next Monday night. It's the Lucan Historical and Archaeological Society, and it's a really nice example of the community coming together, different people in the community coming together to record their archaeological and built heritage. So that's this Monday coming, 1st of December, 7:30, if anybody wants to attend. So with that, and thanks to everybody else for coming along today. It was great to see so many people and so many different people from different areas of work. So with that, we'll go off and get our morning coffee. And thanks very much.